Mr. Secretary, first time in Davos. What was your impression of the World Economic Forum?
Oh, it's fantastic to see leaders, political leaders, business leaders from all around the world gathering here for very candid dialogues. I've enjoyed it very much.
There's a worry, and I'd love your reaction to this, a worry that the president's style, yes, it generates results, but it's also turning off the Europeans. Did you feel that in your conversations with your European partners, that they were offended by the last week?
I did engage in dialogues about that, and I think the rhetoric or the speculation was so over the top. This is going to be the end of NATO. The U.S. military is going to invade Greenland. These were never on the table. The president, since his arrival in office, has been how to strengthen NATO, how to get increased defense spending, how to get increased trade and cooperation between our countries. So he's here to strengthen NATO, increase the security we have against the foes that are rising in the world. Yes, he has a different negotiating style, and he gets different results. I just came from the Peace in the Middle East event. Like, the conventional approaches don't deliver unconventional results. President Trump's about delivering results. And, yeah, that's a different style.
The speech has been about self-resilience, and that's been very much the tone coming out of the White House, the idea that every nation needs to look at what it has and really build that up. And that's one reason why the focus has been on oil. I just wonder, do you feel like prices where they're at are supporting the U.S. shale industry that usually operates at a higher price point? Do you think that this push to produce more oil is actually harming the U.S. shale industry?
Well, first of all, the president has one constituency, and that's the American consumer. You know, businesses have to compete to be the best supplier to consumers. But at the end of the day, the point of a free market isn't to help or protect businesses. It's to serve consumers better. And I remember 10 years ago, the shale companies struggled because oil came down to $80, and before it was $100, and their profitability wasn't great. They've continued to innovate, continued to drive down, break down prices. U.S. oil production is at a record high right now, as is natural gas production. Do they have to continue to innovate and drive down costs? Of course so. But that's what American business does.
At what point, though, does some of the oil, say, from Venezuela start to cannibalize from what the U.S. is producing at home? Something that some people are worried about, whether it takes up space at refiners or whether it just lowers prices in general at a time where they're already struggling to innovate fast enough to keep up with where prices are.
It's a challenge, but I would never underestimate the American oil and gas business or Americans across the sectors. So I don't worry so much about that. And of course, it's a different kind of crude that comes out of Venezuela. And a lot of our refineries were built to refine this heavier, more viscous crude. We produce that light, sweet crude in the United States. It's a good combination. But when you have lower energy prices, you also have faster economic growth, which means faster demand growth. There's always feedback effects here. We're going to see faster, not just U.S. growth, but global growth because of lower global energy prices. In fact, one of my messages here in Davos, talking to the European nations, the EU was a similar size economy to the United States in 2010. They pivoted, focused on climate change, forgot what energy is used for, and they've had very little economic growth. We were both 25% of global consumption just in 2010. Today, the U.S. is 28%, and the EU nations are 18%. That's the cost of expensive energy policies. And what we want to see is Europe reinvigorated, Europe to embrace lower energy prices, reindustrialize their economy, and therefore be a stronger economic and military partner with the U.S.
Well, they outsource their energy to Russia. Potentially that's why we are seeing these exports out of the United States. When it comes to Venezuela, though, do you have plans to go down there, maybe even lead a delegation of oil executives?
I'll go down to Venezuela in the relatively near future. I'll go down in the next few weeks. I'll go down to meet with government officials and look at the existing oil facilities down there. We will definitely see a number of American oil and gas companies going down as well and investigating opportunities on the ground.
Who are you going to be going down with? I imagine you're on speed dial and have constant conversations with Mike Wirth, the CEO of Chevron. But is it Darren Woods potentially feeling a little bit better? He did call it uninvestable, Venezuela, when he met with the president recently.
Well, that's a backward-looking comment, right? Because, of course, for 10, 15 years, it has been uninvestable. So this is about looking forward, about where we're going, and who are the early movers going to be in an environment that's better today than it was a month ago? But is it fully rule of law, democratic, thriving society? Again, of course not. This is a process. We're only 3 weeks into it. So that you're going to see increased production out of Venezuela, first from the incumbent players like Chevron, and then from the new, smaller, scrappier American independents that'll go in the ground.
So wildcatters are the ones that are reaching out to you?
Yes, across the board. Bigger companies, too, but the faster movers will be the wildcatters.
And are you planning on giving them these fresh licenses so if they do feel like they have the security concerns and it's good to go in Venezuela, that they could start?
Absolutely. They will start, yes. And we will move OFAC approvals for anyone that wants to go down there. We're going to let the marketplace decide that. I'm not going to choose or pick among companies. But we're going to certainly open up that opportunities together with the interim authorities in Venezuela right now. We're going to open up the opportunities to grow oil production in Venezuela. Good for America, good for Venezuela.
Not choosing and picking is an interesting one, because we have seen the administration choose and pick certain companies to develop things. Why is this a different moment?
Well, look, to do things short and quick, to immediately market the crude out of Venezuela and get money flowing as fast as possible, you got to make choices then. So immediately, when you have an immediate objective, you got to make decisions. But ultimately, we want capitalism and the marketplace to decide who the operators are, who the marketers of the crude are, and what the future of the industry is going to be in Venezuela.
What's the ultimate goal? Is the ultimate goal to take share away from, say, the Middle East and Russia? Is the goal to lower prices below $50 a barrel? What's the ultimate goal with the United States' involvement in Venezuela's oil industry?
Well, the ultimate goal was to stabilize our hemisphere, to reduce the running of drugs and guns and criminality. Venezuela has basically become a big drug criminal organization with Hezbollah's Western Hemisphere headquarters there, Russia, Iran, Cuba. So the goal of Venezuela was geostrategic, to have it a safe, peaceful, prosperous ally of the United States as it was for decades. And as part of that, the tremendous resources Venezuela has in oil, for sure, that's going to be a large part of their economy growing and all that. And is more Western Hemisphere oil production good for the United States and good for the Western Hemisphere? Sure, but it's good for the whole world.
Secretary Wright, do you think you can work with Delcy Rodriguez?
We are today. We absolutely are today. Look,
and you'll meet her when you go there?
I certainly will.
Because she was their oil minister. And Jonathan asked me this when Nicolas Maduro was captured. I used to cover OPEC. Does the United States basically have a seat at the table when it comes to the cartel?
The cartel in OPEC?
Yeah, because basically you have this pragmatic approach to Delcy Rodriguez. You're bringing in the energy companies into Venezuela, and Venezuela is part of OPEC.
I hadn't even thought about that. But, of course, we're not looking for a seat at the table at OPEC. Of course, the United States produces more oil today than Saudi Arabia and Russia, the two biggest other producers of oil. So I think we're quite comfortable with where we sit. We just want a stable, prosperous Venezuela to be good for the United States, good for the Western Hemisphere, and good for Venezuelans.
Should I tell you the answer that Anne-Marie gave me when I asked that question to her? Anne-Marie turned around and said they already have one. It's Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And they can lean on the Saudis to get what they want. Is that fair? Do you have enough influence on that cartel at the moment?
We don't lean on them to get what we want. But unlike the Biden administration, of course, we've embraced the growing economies, the growing freedom in the Middle East. The goal is to have a peaceful, prosperous Middle East and not a conflict-ridden, it's about bullets and shooting people and who hates each other. We want to make it free and prosperous.
Well, do you remember the first term when there was that price war? Prices went to negative on WTI, and the president picked up the phone. This was his first term at 45, called President Putin and called the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And that's why I always say the U.S. has a seat at the table. The president does seem to want to work in the energy space.
He understands the criticality of energy. And, of course, during COVID, in emergency situations, you want a strong, resolute, business-focused leader.
Can I finish on security guarantees in Venezuela? I think it's important. Can we offer security guarantees to these companies that are going to develop those reserves?
No, we have no plans to do that. The U.S. involvement right now in controlling the flow of funds in Venezuela gives us huge leverage to reduce the criminality in that country, reestablish peace and better business conditions in the short term. In the long run, you've got to go all the way to a representative government, rewriting of laws and the Constitution, but that will take time. But no, the activity we're doing is moving the security situation in a positive direction, but we are not going to get involved in providing on-the-ground security for people in Venezuela. Oil and gas companies operate all around the world in all different settings. They're well-versed in those challenges.
You understand why some companies might have reservations about going in because they'll wonder what comes after President Trump and whether the next administration will have that same commitment that you have to that country.
Of course, it's an evolving environment. This is not for everyone. There's always different risk and reward situations at times, which is why the wildcatters will move first. The bigger, longer term, tens of billions of dollar investments, they're going to wait till there's more clarity in that environment. But fortunately, with Chevron there, with Repsol there, with Eni there, with Shell right next door, we already have big incumbent players that are ready to grow their investments.